Joining me now is a man, Brian Ferentz claims that the only person outside of Iowa football that watches as much or more of Iowa football is Scott Dochterman, national college football writer for The Athletic. Scott, I really appreciate your time. Scott is somebody, unfortunately, when I have a million questions about the draft, they all go to Scott. So he spends a lot of time listening to me badger him. I really appreciate him taking time to basically talk about things I always ask him about on camera. But Scott, thank you for your time. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I appreciate the opportunity to join Hawkeye headquarters today, and thrilled to be with you as always, Blake.
A friend of Hawkeye headquarters. Scott is, when I was learning about Iowa football, when I was just getting acclimated to things, he was the person I read. The articles that I read were from The Athletic, and Scott's got a promotion now. You got a big promotion?
I think so. I think we're now up to for the draft. It's I think it's $2 a month, so for The Athletic. So it's a great deal
man.
for draft, Major League Baseball, college football,
Yeah.
the like. So.
Well, for me, this is my favorite time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
We love college football, we
Mm-hmm.
love the NFL, and we get to collide both worlds.
Right.
Do you feel kind of the same way about that?
Oh, absolutely. I love the draft. I mean, the draft season, I remember my first memory of the draft, of being kind of associated with, I was in middle school in the middle 80s in Indianola, Iowa, where I lived briefly. And I was late to school because the draft used to be on Tuesday mornings, and it started at like 7 in the morning. And I was late to school because I was watching the picks roll in, and I was probably in 6th or 7th grade at that point. So this has been something that's been a part of my life. And then, yeah, every year, it's the marriage between pro football and college football, the two most popular sports. Marriage. And I remember one year, it's been probably 10 years ago now, but the highest ratings for the draft were Cleveland, Ohio, and Birmingham, Alabama. And you see the reason why. Cleveland Browns, Alabama Crimson Tide, and that's why it's the perfect marriage.
It's the best. And again, Scott, I love picking your brain on this stuff because you really do understand both worlds really well. And there is a game where you cover a guy and you think, okay, well, he's good in Iowa, but is he going to be an NFL player? That's something that I'm learning. And one of the questions I asked you last year, probably in January because I'm a sicko and I'm already thinking about the draft.
Yeah.
Like, Scott, is Logan Lee an NFL guy? And you're like, yeah, I could see it.
Yeah.
And then, sure enough, he's a 6th-round pick. But there's definitely a learning curve for me covering college football, understanding like, okay, this player is going to go in this round because of this reason. And a lot of it's physical attributes, right? Lucas Van Ness was not somebody I saw being a top 15 pick when I covered him. But then when you talk about the measurables, the splash plays, okay, the Packers look at him and say, all right, we can make that guy we got some players walking behind us. But anyways.
Mark Gronowski.
So, Scott, I want to talk about the players that we covered this past season.
Yeah.
Maybe your thought process in evaluating them, where you think, again, just how you would see them as NFL players. For me, I've had a few thoughts about Caleb Johnson, and when you watch him play, my comp is a mix of Le'Veon Bell and Derrick Henry. He runs like Derrick Henry, but his body resembles more of Le'Veon Bell because Derrick's one of one. Nobody's 6'3", can take on the workload that he does for a decade in the league. We both saw him emerge and develop and mature. What do you see from him in terms of his pro potential, and do you feel like fit's really going to be a big deal getting him in the scheme?
It always is for running back, and in his case, it is. I mean, I think you want a one-cut-go type of team, whether it's zone, whether it's gap, that part doesn't matter, but you want him to be able to fit into it. I think when you look at like two guys that are rated higher than him, and legitimately so, Ashton Genty and Omarion Hampton, that they have a little bit more wiggle to them, I would say. Whereas it's more straight ahead with Caleb Johnson. That by no stretch means that he's a negative. And I've seen some really good comps. DeMarco Murray is one. I threw out there David Johnson from Northern Iowa because he's got the same type of build, the 6'2"-ish, 225-ish type of running back. And, he's physical. He's not Derrick Henry, as you know. Nobody is. He's a unicorn. But I think he's the type of guy that you can throw out there 25 times a game to run the football. But he's not a guy that you say, we're going to use him in the pass and throw him 8 balls a game. He's a guy that maybe 1 or 2. So he's probably going to be working more in tandem. He screams second round. And to me, a team like Dallas, Chicago, Denver really likes him. The Giants have obviously a relationship with him with Liddell Betts, and they could use somebody like that. So he's got a market. He's been active. He's been out and about. And it's going to be, can they marry their system to what his skill set is, as opposed to saying, well, he's going to fit. Because whereas Genty or Hampton probably fit anybody's system.
Yeah.
His case, it's a little bit more narrow, but he can be a 1,000-yard back and a potential Pro Bowler if he continues to improve.
That'd be something if he and Tyrone Tracy played for Liddell Betts in New York.
Know.
That'd be something.
Yeah.
Scott, the way I see it is, I think about 10 years ago, you take a guy like DeMarco Murray and you put him in a completely different system, way different player. I feel like Caleb has to be in the right system to reach his full, and you could say that for anybody, right? Especially for running backs. I would love for him to go to Minnesota's system, but they did just invest in Aaron Jones, and they picked up Elijah. I guess they picked up a backup, but I would love to see him go to that type of scheme, because again, if you ask him to go east and west, you're probably not going to get a productive player.
Right.
But you need, there was nobody that got more out of the schematic change here than Caleb, and the O-line too. The running game as a whole, and we talked to Omar today about that a little bit. It has been fun to watch a guy like him take on that workload. He had no fumbles last year as well. I feel like that's, when you think of, I guess you gave me David Johnson, but as far as the Le'Veon Bell comp, do you kind of see that as well, where you could give him 300 carries for 4 years and he could be the workhorse for an NFL team? Or do you think maybe you'd like to see him in more of a complementary role where maybe you have like a Jamal Williams, Aaron Jones type situation?
I would like to see him a little more complimentary. I think he could be the lead back.
Yeah.
I would like to see him a little bit more complimentary because, like with Le'Veon Bell, I covered games with him when he was at Michigan State, and he was really good there. And he was actually bigger than he was in the NFL.
Really?
He was probably 10, 12 pounds bigger in Michigan State than he was in the NFL. And I think, to be honest with you, that Caleb Johnson was much more effective at this level than Le'Veon Bell was at Michigan State. But once he slimmed down, he became that full service running back where he could do everything for him and become much more active in the passing game. I think that's what Caleb Johnson has to show. I think he's capable of that, and I think he's got a little bit more power to him than even Le'Veon Bell did, even though he was really good at that area. But he doesn't have quite the level of quickness. And so they are similar. They're similar in build, and of course, seeing them wearing black and gold is real comparable. But I think that what I just want to see more from him is, can he be more active in the passing game? They didn't ask him to do that a lot here because the passing game was pretty suspect. But I think in the next level, if he goes, and there are a lot of teams. I don't think he gets out of the second round. I think somebody's going to take him there.
Well, there's another question. If you put Caleb in last year's draft class, where you didn't have a running back in the first round, could Caleb be a late first round? Because again, it all just depends on who else is available as well, right? So could Caleb be in a different year, maybe a first round pick?
Yeah, I think he's got those characteristics. I think what's benefiting him and all the running backs this year, because it's a really deep running back group, is that what Saquon Barkley did last year, which we saw flashes of over there at Kinnick in 2017, is still the greatest performance I've ever seen individually in college football.
Wow.
But what he was able to do, and then the schematic changes on defense. Everybody's going too high safety. So what do you do against it? You run until they bring it down to make it 8 in the box. Well, they're not doing that because they fear the quarterback. So now you have a big physical running back like Caleb Johnson, and you attack that. It's a perfect scenario for him, which is why he'll be elevated. And it's not out of the realm of possibility he sneaks into the late first round. But I think it's more realistic to think somewhere in the 40s, somewhere from the Bears at 39 to the Cowboys at 44, in that range is kind of the sweet spot for him. And I expect Hampton to probably sneak into the first round. So, but he's got a great opportunity ahead of him.
You see that, Scott, a lot of times in college production, you see a guy has a great junior year and for whatever reason, a down senior year, and the draft stock obviously changes. We saw Sebastian Castro come back, and did he hurt his draft stock? Probably. Would he have been a day 3 pick if he came out last year? based on the splash plays, potentially. Yeah, you also look at a guy like Luke Lachey, who his sophomore year, he looked like he was going to be a freaking All-American, and because of the injury he had in 23 and the schematic change in 24, like, we didn't get to see maybe what he could have been. I guess just maybe in a general sense, do you see those situations as, oh, we found out who that guy really is, or a team could really get a steal? Because I still see Luke as a potential NFL starter. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Starting with Luke, yes. I think what really is unfortunate is when he actually had the opportunity to go and have success, that's when he broke his leg. He was ascending. I mean, he had, 10 catches, through 2 games or something. I mean, he was really looking the part like the next Sam Laporta, the next TJ Hawkinson, and the like. And then he broke his leg and it was vicious. Last year, I think it took him some time to kind of get back, and I think he needs more intense coaching to get to be a full-service receiver part of it. And he was going in that direction. I think, it just kind of stagnated, if you will. But as a blocker, he's really good. I mean, he's not known as like Hawkinson and certainly Kittle and Laporta were really good blockers. He's not known for that, but he's in their category. He is, and he built himself from, I remember seeing him here, I think it was during the COVID year, when he first arrived. He's 6'6", 205, and could just dunk. He could dunk on a 12-foot rim type of thing. Now he's 250 plus, a willing, engaged blocker. His first pancake came in Maryland in 2021, and he ran over to Sam Laporta and screaming, "I just pancaked somebody!" And Sam's like, "I just caught the ball, man." It was just, he's got a big brothering him, but I think he's the type of guy that he's probably gonna, right now he's like mocked around the 6th, 7th round. I think he'll move up a little bit to maybe the 5th round because people will say Iowa tight end. You know what you're going to get sort of with him, which is the baseline is, the floor is pretty good. The ceiling is much higher than a lot of Iowa prospects because you don't look at him as a finished product. I think in his case, it's like, at worst case scenario, we've got our number 3 tight end who's a willing blocker who will play on special teams and occasionally catch a touchdown pass. And then, but best case scenario is his athletic ability returns, we polish him up as a receiver, and he might have a potential starter. So I think pretty highly of Luke and his potential at the next level. It's not going to work out as well for him as a draftee, but it will as a pro.
Exactly. And as far as Sebastian Castro goes, actually going back to Luke, I do have to go and give you my comp because I wrote all these comps down and did my research. But Kyle Rudolph, 6'6", maybe not the fastest guy, big frame, wide range in the passing game, and can block. And Rudolph was a 2-time Pro Bowler, a 12-year pro. I mean, is there a comp that comes to mind for you with Luke?
Yeah, I mean, initially I would probably go with somebody like a Pat Fryermuth, but that's probably on the ascent that he was in 2023 before the injury. Last year I would say, Kyle Rudolph is a really good comp, no question about it. He was great at Notre Dame, he was great for the Minnesota Vikings for all those years. So, I mean, he's got really good abilities, and I think Luke can take that next step and turn into that, and if he's a 2-time Pro Bowler, if he's plays for 8, 9, 10 years like Kyle Rudolph did, they'll be thrilled, especially if he goes in the 5th round. I mean, if you get a 5th rounder and you can play for 10 years for the Cincinnati Bengals or somebody like that, you'd sign up for that yesterday, tomorrow, and the next day. So I think he's going to, I think he's got a chance to
I guess I'm thinking best case scenario, too.
Right.
And that's still a great best
Of course.
Case. I like Fry, but that's a good one. How about Sebastian Castro? We saw so many, I mean, he just destroyed Braylon Allen in the hole, forced the fumble. He had about 4 or 5 monster jump-off film plays, but this past season he just really struggled. I mean, how do you evaluate him?
I think in some ways they were asking him to do too much. I think he is a traditional strong safety box guy. He got lined up a couple of times, especially like Iowa State against Jalen Knoll in the slot and asking to cover man, and he's running, a wheel route. That's a tough matchup. And Jalen Knoll has proved that he's pretty good. He's not just a guy. I mean, he's pushing 1st round status right now for Iowa State, and if not early 2nd round. So I thought at times they asked him to do a little bit too much in coverage, but I think he's still a very effective player. His quick strike hitting ability in short space is as good as we've seen here from that position group. Really, I mean, I don't want to invoke Bob Sanders, but it's really in kind of that territory.
Yeah.
Nobody's Bob, but he's in that category where if he's within a few feet of you, he hits you and you go down, and it looks pretty thunderous. He's got good ball skills. You know, he's had a pick six. He would have had another one, but he took the knee against Wisconsin a year and a half ago. And so he's probably, and he's a pick your kind of poison guy. He's fast, he's got good speed, but he's not fast necessarily. You know, he's height, weight, speed. He's not quite what you ideally put in there, but he's the type of guy that you just plug in there and he's going to play and he's going to hit. He's going to play special teams. I think that's where he can make his real forte right away. So, fourth round-ish. You know, I think fourth, fifth round, because again, well-coached player. He didn't have the splash plays. He didn't ascend the way we thought he would. We thought he's coming back. He's going to be a first-team All-American.
Yep.
Didn't quite get there, but he was very solid in most areas. And I think, hey, guy hits people, he tackles them, he intercepts passes, he's in good position. And I think locking him in as a safety only will be very beneficial to his career and his career arc.
It's fantastic insight, Scott. This is why I've been asking you to do this.
Well, thank you.
You talked me out of my comp, too. I was going to go with Micah Hyde. Probably not Micah Hyde.
No, if there's a player here that reminds me of Micah Hyde a little bit, it's Cone Ensringer. And I don't use Micah very often because Micah is top shelf for me in almost every area. He and Kittle, like from before the last 10 years, those two are like my favorite players that people. And so Micah is special, and he's different. He's wiry. He's got an athletic ability to him that very few people have had here. Cooper DeJean is kind of in that category, maybe a little better than Micah even. But I think when you look at Castro, very physical. You know, maybe this may be going back a ways. Mike Brown, who played for the Bears, and you know, from Nebraska. You know, always around the ball, always hitting people, you know, doing things. Never jumped off the page when it came to athletic ability, but man, you plug him in, you don't have to worry about him, and that's a big plus if you're an NFL team.
Fourth round pick. Okay, I did not. I've looked at the mock drafts and I've seen. Okay, fourth round pick, because if you use him differently than he was last year, probably a different player. How about linebacker, and obviously like Jack Campbell and Jay Higgins are both All-Americans. One's for 18th overall pick, one's probably going to be a 5th or 6th round pick, you know, just based on, again, the pro potential. You know, Scott, you've also made the point to me as well that a lot of Iowa guys stick around because teams draft them because they know what they're getting. You know exactly you're going to get a guy that's playing special teams, he's going to be a good locker room guy, probably not many off-the-field issues. But when you talk about Jay and Kirk threw Nick Jackson in this equation when I asked them about it, do you see, I mean, how do you see things working out for him in the NFL?
I'm very high on Jay, and I just seeing him here, he's an overlooked guy. He's easy to overlook. It's like, oh yeah, he got all these tackles in this defense, and well, but look what he ran at the combine. Well, it's the same time that Josie Jewell ran at the combine, and Josie Jewell's now, you know, entering his 30s as a human being, and he's still starting at linebacker, and he's got the same type of makeup. He's a different player, but I think he's the type. Again, you know, not really like Luke necessarily, but you know, similar to Castro. But I think somebody's going to look at him in the 5th round, for instance, 5th, 6th round, that area. But it's like, what are we missing with this guy? This is where NFL teams get too trapped into the measurables, into the athletic ability off the charts. They start looking at all these aspects, and then they go, they're missing the player. And then the smart team goes, you know what, all this guy did was he was very productive. He was first-team All-American. He played in a great defense the last few years. Impeccable character. I mean, just off the charts as a person. He's so engaging, understands the game. You know, he hits people and they stay down. He's got all those great aspects that, you know, if you're, and I think if you want to change your culture as a defense, I said this before with Jack Campbell 2 years ago, and I thought the Lions were a perfect place for him because of that. If I'm the Cleveland Browns or Cincinnati Bengals or Indianapolis Colts or somebody like that where you're like, you know what, we kind of need somebody younger there who can kind of, he's going to come into your locker room, build accountability, do everything right on the field. Maybe he's not going to go to the Pro Bowl, but he's gonna start for you. And a worst case scenario, he's going to be on your special teams units, and he's a guy that everybody gravitates towards. That's what you need in the NFL. You swing and miss too many times. This is get on base. You know, it's not strikeout. It's a hey, we're getting on base here with Jay Higgins.
And Josie was what, a fifth round pick himself?
Fourth, yeah.
Fourth?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jay actually told me that he picked the agent that represents Josie for that reason, because they know how to market guys who have that on-field production. And you make a ton of great points. I know Nick's a little more on the fringe. Maybe same type of situation, maybe just in a different way.
Yeah, he's a little different because of his build.
Yeah.
He's a little more narrow. Great production. You know, and this is one thing about the Iowa program that I've known, especially now when I do see other programs, is character here is paramount. I mean, the people we get to cover, it's truly a blessing. You know, compared to some other places, because we're talking about great people. And Nick Jackson figures into that greatly. Now, what happens to him? He's going to be a free agent. And for him, it's about finding that opportunity that works for him. And this is the difference when you get late in the draft versus free agency, is find the opportunity that works for him. Best type of situation for him isn't necessarily where can I start, it's where can I make the team. And in a lot of cases, it's a team that's cash strapped, that they have no money in the salary cap. The New Orleans Saints is always perpetually there. You go, they need somebody to make the team that's cheap. And somebody, it's like, well, we have like a heavy roster, like Buffalo's in the same type of boat. They have a heavy roster of guys that they already know that are going to be on the team. You know, maybe they're only looking for a couple of extras, but hey, he's cheap, he's a good character guy, he fits in well, he can play special teams for us. He's got that kind of ability to really do that, but you've got to find the right shot to do it, and that's, I've seen it a lot of times here at Iowa that, you know, there was a guy, Barrington Wade, a few years ago, really never started here, only started a couple of games, but he got in and he was in the NFL for 2 years, you know, mainly as a special teamer, mainly because you put him out there, you know what you're going to get. And I think in Nick Jackson's case, that's the situation. What you don't want to go to, and this is where Iowa players are hurt a little bit, is if you have a team that has a ton of draft picks or a team that's got a lot of salary cap space, you're going to get overlooked. So if you got a team with like 10 draft picks or something, and they're like, well, you know, we're just going to put them as cannon fodder in training camp, and then you get cut. You don't want to do that. And what this kind of goes to what some of the other players are going to experience late in the draft. There's two realms here. You get a team that gets in around 7, and maybe they've got 46 of their guys already figured out. They've already got some heavy draft picks. It's like they're going to swing and miss on somebody. They're going to swing hard, let's say. Somebody who has character concerns, somebody who has an injury, or somebody who's just never really measured up to their potential. Because if you strike out, who cares? What you want is a team. Minnesota Vikings has 4 draft picks this year. Now they have some salary cap space, but they're going to be looking for free agents who can make the team. And how do you do that? Well, you pick your spot. Like, okay, you know, hopefully they didn't draft a linebacker. Okay, well now you sign, and it's like, hey, I prove I can make this team. That's what you want if you're a Nick Jackson, that opportunity.
Yeah, and another guy who will be drafted is Y.A. Black. Because
absolutely.
You see him as a potential, maybe not a difference maker, but he could be. You throw him in certain situations, and he's going to eat up blocks.
And that's what people don't get. They'll look at the stats, and then they'll look at his 40 time and say, oh, he's no good. He didn't do anything last year. No, what he did what he was asked to do. And that's what the NFL people do too, which is take your blocks, take the 2 gap. You're there to just stonewall them. Take 2 blockers so Jay Higgins can make 100,000 tackles in 2 years. And that's what he did. At the next level, they're going to ask the same thing. There are different aspects of every play. It's like, even if you're like a 5 technique defensive end, which he could play technically, sometimes it's push back the pocket so then your edge rusher can get around there. Or same thing up front is if it's just stonewall the line of scrimmage so then guys can make the tackle. Don't worry about making it yourself. He fits that. He's strong, he's physical, he's active. You know, does he have the best 40 time? No way. But he does what he's asked to do. And and one of our guys that I work with got a text from a Big Ten offensive line coach. He's like, this guy killed us, because he's not a 3-down guy. He's not a guy you're going to want on 3rd down rushing the quarterback.
Yeah.
But what you want for him is, running situations, 1st and 10, 2nd and 8, stuff like that, where, okay, they want to run the ball, you clog up the gaps. And he's done that really well here at Iowa.
I want to go back to comps just because Jay, Stephen Tulloch, does that name ring a bell?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'll give you props for that.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
Yeah, I like that.
Hopefully Jay doesn't have the torn Achilles in the celebration. Hope Jay's career is a little more memorable than that for his sake. But no, 5'11", a 4.86 40 times. Somebody who had a productive player in college just did not test well at the combine, but carved himself out a role in the NFL. And if Jay could have 11 years in the league, that'd be fantastic for him. But as far as YA goes, I mean, there's a ton of guys. But is there anybody that comes to mind for YA?
Yeah, on the high end, I would probably go with like a Vince Wilfork. He's bigger than YA even, but that's the type of player, like New England was notorious for that. Fit guys who fit roles, and his role was clog. It wasn't, now he's going to make tackles, and he's, but that's the type of player that you want to get, is somebody who's capable of just play your role. Don't worry about darting through. A few years ago they had Davion Nixon, who was Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year and a first-team All-American. He played outside the scheme, and they sort of tolerated it because he was so athletic and could do things. That's not YA. And YA's game isn't that. But YA's game is exactly what they've seen, and they're going to like that. So I think, it wouldn't shock me if he's an early 3rd day guy, like a 4th rounder. And again, maybe his production, maybe his upside isn't like a Ty Robinson from Nebraska or CJ West from Indiana. It's, we want him to fit this role so our other guys can make the plays. That's what the hallmark of being a good defense is.
Scott, Riley Moss was a perfect example of a player who, when we saw him here, like, he was first-team All-Big Ten player, somebody you could put on a number 1 and feel good about it. It took a while, but teams eventually figured out that he had the abilities to play in the NFL. Now you see 2 years in, he's a starting corner, but it took a while for people to figure that out. Completely different players, not going to be the same situation. I think you know where I'm going with this. Jamari Harris had 3 productive seasons here. Okay, but do you see him just in terms of on the field? Because I know there's other things going on, but in terms of on the field, do you see him being able to do what we talked about Nick doing? Just being able, hey, this guy, you can put him on the field as a 4th or 5th corner and be okay with it.
Oh, he's got that ability for sure. He played really well when he's played the last 2 years, especially last year in those 10 games that he competed in. He's certainly a NFL caliber guy that makes a team. As far as draft goes, it's kind of 50-50. He's got the tangibles to play it. He's got the film to play. The investigation part of it kind of comes into, do they feel like he was injured enough to justify deciding not to play in the final 2 games of the regular season? And that's up to each individual. I did a story, actually it came out here on a Thursday, and I did a story on this, which was talking to GMs, coaches, scouts, kind of on their thoughts, and most of them were like, yeah, we'll look at it, but it's not a big deal to them, because players opt out of bowl games all the time. Now, one said when it came to the regular season opting out for the draft, that's not a good look. And I wonder how that's going to go. And he does have a little bit of baggage off the field, not anything terrible. I mean, he had an OWI early in his career, and he had a gambling situation here, which turned out to be next to nothing and unfortunate. But I think when you look at him as a player, he's got length, he's got quickness, he's got abilities. It's, later on, if he's available in the 6th round, corners are hard to find. So if you're a corner, if you're a pass rusher, if you're a tackle, if you're a receiver, those kind of positions, there's a premium on them. And so it wouldn't surprise me if you get in the 6th round and somebody's like, you know what, take the shot, and if he doesn't make it, he doesn't make it, who cares? But he's worth it.
Well, you talked about talking to GMs and coaches and scouts. One thing that always just intrigues me is 2 weeks before the draft, up until the draft, there's so much change that goes. There's so many different things that people, change their minds on, and you see players go from maybe he's a first-round pick, now he's in the 4th round for some reason. I don't know how this stuff totally works, but again, Sam Laporta was not a first-round talent. The evaluators had him as maybe a 3rd or a 4th round guy, but all of a sudden, okay, now he's the 34th overall pick and basically a mini version of Rob Gronkowski in 2 years in the league. Why so much fluctuation over the course of the pre-draft process? And do you feel like teams kind of overthink this stuff sometimes?
Oh, absolutely. That drives me nuts. I mean, there are different stages, and it kind of cracks me up to draft season. There's the echo chamber season, which is usually March. It's like right after the combine until maybe the 1st of April, which is, to me, is all about who can get on the same page, because you don't want to be the outlier and say, I think this guy's a 1st rounder and he's a 5th rounder, or I think he's a 4th rounder and then he's a 1st rounder. You don't want to get on that outside. So then everybody's comps start to shrink, and then there's a very small variance, and then it's lying season, and it's tear down season, which is what we're in right now with from April through the draft, which teams are lying because they want to shake people off their trail. If they if the Chicago Bears think that Caleb Johnson is actually the running back that they want, they're going to do everything they can to shake him off. Or if it's somebody else, and we're going to bring in him, so everybody thinks it's him, and vice versa. So this is a wild part of the year, and of course, we're in media. What happens? We're like cats with a laser pointer, and all of somebody just points the laser, and we're all, where it go? And that's where we are with the draft, and with all things for that matter, quarterback situation, whatever. But the draft, it's a scout whispers to a media member, I just don't know if he can play, man. He got his numbers, they were inflated against this competition, and next thing you know, it's like, and then I was talking to a couple of scouts, and they said this, and then all of a sudden, oh wow, well I can't put him as a late 1st rounder, he's a 3rd rounder. And you mentioned Sam Laporta. Well, people were looking at him. Well, look at Iowa's offense. He only scored 1 touchdown. And, well, it wasn't his fault.
Right.
They look at the toughness and what he did at the Music City Bowl, and that's why Dan Campbell walked into his meeting with a big piece of chaw in his mouth, and he's like, "This is my guy," And the Dallas Cowboys were almost ready to suck him in the 1st round.
Wow.
And then people were giving Detroit a hard time because they picked him over Michael Mayer. I think their projection looks pretty good, even though Michael Mayer had the better college career.
No, this is. Oh gosh, Scott, this is awesome. This is like crack for me, because I love hearing these stories, and I'm sure you've covered the same thing 20 times over. But then again, you look at a lot of players who, like, you were very close with the Kittles, right?
Yeah.
And then and somehow George is a 5th round pick. You think that, not that George and Sam's careers were the same, but I mean, you look at them in the NFL, they're both Pro Bowlers.
Yeah.
One of them got the emphasis on the injury that kept Kittle out for so much time at Iowa, and look how much that actually mattered when he got to the NFL. Everybody misses time. It's like, find somebody that isn't injury prone. So the overthinking thing is interesting. Is there an Iowa prospect that you were totally wrong on? Like, you thought this guy had no shot of being a good NFL player, and he was, or somebody you were really high on and maybe didn't turn out to be as great as you thought?
Well, there are a couple of players that every year I usually, I'll say there should be 6 or 7 draft picks, and it usually be 5 or 6. It's like 1 or 2 players every year that I'm like, oh man, I can't believe I was wrong on that, or I thought that they'd had a better chance than they did. Mitch King, and I'm going way back, but he was defensive lineman of the year at the Big Ten. He was small, defensive tackle, had like 19 tackles for loss his senior year. I thought he'd get drafted. James Morris, if it wasn't for, a hernia, he would have probably gotten drafted. He was a guy, I would say, and just trying to go through the Rolodex of all the players over the last 20 years or whatever. But I would probably say Anthony Hitchens was somebody I didn't expect to have that kind of of an impact right away. He's certainly one at the top. Let me think here. I thought Adrian Claiborne would be a little bit better. He had a nice career. He had 40 sacks. He was in the NFL for 10 years, but you kind of envision him more as a Pro Bowler type. But there always are guys at Iowa, and they've really done an awesome job with this. Is those free agents, they make the team.
Yeah.
and then they stay. You know, Christian Welch is probably one that I'll point out. You know, he was a linebacker, didn't really play much. He was backup to Jewell and Bo Bauer and Ben Neiman, and you know, and he's carved out a really nice career as a special teamer. You know, people sign him every year. Baltimore signed him again. You know, because again, dude knows how to play. Doesn't have the best ability in the world, but he knows how to play special teams, and you're going to be on the field 20 times a game. So somebody like that is, to me, is priceless, and that's what Iowa develops. And I think those are the types of players you see. Ben Neiman has had a really nice career. Same type of scenario, that he wasn't drafted. You know, gets picked up by the Chiefs. He wins a Super Bowl, and you know, last year he starts late in the season for the Detroit Lions. So those would be the guys that kind of come to mind as far as that really stuck.
I'll ask you one last question, because I have to keep telling my Packer fans, give Lucas Van Ness one more year.
Mm-hmm.
Give him another year. He can still, you know, Rashawn Gary didn't pop until his third year. You know, you covered him. I'm sure followed him a little bit in the NFL. Where do you see his trajectory going? And are you still kind of like me, or hey, the court's still out on Lucas Van Ness?
I think he has enough ability to start and play well. I've been kind of surprised, perplexed, because he's had some splash plays, and I just wonder schematically if he's in the right spot. You know, they went from a 3-4 to a 4-3, and they've never started him, and it's like, you know, he's never started a game since high school, which is incredible because he didn't start here. In some ways, it's like, can he be a draft day trade? You know, can they the Packers package him with somebody else and bump up, and
They moved Preston Smith and moved him to the Steelers because it wasn't a fit.
Right.
Same thing.
Yeah, and so I think he's a fit, and he's still young, relatively. I mean, he left after his sophomore year. This would be like coming out after his senior year here. You know, when you look back, you can't not take that step. I know that's double negative. I apologize, but you have to take that step if you're him. If you're going to be a projected first rounder, you got to go to the NFL. But had he come back to Iowa, he would have played a ton. He would have been an All-American at Iowa, and that's the rub. And now with the NIL, you've got the ability to kind of mitigate that. It's like, sure, you could probably be a first rounder, but you can also make a lot of money at college and become an All-American, and then propel yourself into the 5th overall draft pick or 8th or something. I think he's still good. You know, I'm not going to push him out yet, but I also kind of think that the Packers haven't done a good enough job with him. So I think it's mutually beneficial here, or mutually negative, I suppose. And you know, would I like to see him opposite, you know, Martez Sweat in Chicago?
Of course.
I think he'd be great there.
Yeah.
You know, would I see him again opposite Aiden Hutchinson in Detroit? I think he'd be great there. You know, why he's not great in Green Bay, they need to figure that out for themselves, because I think he's got enough talent.
Scott, I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you. You know, and again, I got all my questions out. I got all my questions for you out, so you don't have to listen to me pester you at the Final Four or wherever the heck I see you these days, because you're all over the place. But really appreciate your time. And again, there's nobody. You know, Joel Klatt politely declined an interview with me in Indy last year. I got Joel Klatt. I got Scott Dochterman, the best in the business. I appreciate
thank you.
Thank
That's
you so
very
much.
kind of you.